Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce to you our Black-owned Business of the Week, where we showcase quality Black-owned businesses for you to support every week. This week's business is the 1865 Brewing Company, located in Hampton, Virginia. The 1865 Brewing Company is the first Black-owned brewery in the Hampton Roads area. They have a wide selection from finely crafted Belgian ale and hard cider to fresh coffee and tea for non-drinkers. Be sure to check them out for your next social outing.
Our chosen occupation is one of the most important parts of our lives as adults, being not only a source of income for us to provide for our families, but also where a large portion of us derive a sense of meaning and fulfillment. With that being said, there's a lot of ambiguity around how exactly one should navigate their career. On this week's episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the Breakdown crew sat down with HR professional Tessa Carey and returning guest Dondre George to discuss how do you know when it's time for you to leave a job. Let's see what we come up with.
So the question we have for today, how do you know when it's time to quit your job? Comment below, let us know. The guests for today's episode also include Tessa and returning guest Dondre.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So, customary part of the episode, so we typically give a background to the question. This question was really brought about just my ponderings on where I was at earlier this year as I shifted employment from my previous career to it's the same career field, but it's a new employer. And I was thinking about how could we better help and equip people with skills to navigate this, as this is a very difficult skill set that a lot of people stumble through. And I wanted to make the recordings that we do more actionable and more helpful to people in an immediate way. And I think this is something that's extremely important and a huge part of people's lives. So I think it's only appropriate that we speak on this. So as part of this, I reached out to two people who are aces at navigating career trajectories, career moves. Tessa, just a little bit of background on her. So she is a HR professional. And so I joke with her because whenever she changes careers, she gets a new job title. So I sent her a picture of a WWE Championship title in the group chat. And I was like, Tessa's adding another title to her collection. And she is a master at improving the processes in her organization and then moving on. And she's taught me a lot about navigating career discussions, whether it be negotiating salary, whether it be how I conduct myself at work in terms of conflict with employers or people who I'm managing. And I think that she brings to the table a wealth of knowledge. And then Dondre, he's someone who I consult with very closely as a friend on career matters, because we come from a very similar place. We met at work. It was both our first jobs out of college, so we knew the environment. We saw the good, the bad, all that, and so that really shaped our perspective. And he's somebody who I value his opinion on these matters very much so. And he's also been able to navigate. I think, Dondre, this is you're currently on your third job out of college, and everyone has been a vertical move for you. Mm-hmm. And Dondre has been a standout employee, as far as I know, and a standout coworker from way back in the day. So I feel that these two are extremely well equipped for today's discussion.
Perfect.
So Tessa, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So as Bryan has said, I've had a lot of jobs. I've probably been in HR for about 18 years. And over those 18 years, I've had 10 jobs with 6 or 7 different companies. Sometimes those moves were lateral moves. Sometimes those moves were vertical moves, but they always aligned with what my values and priorities were. And so the one thing I would say about leaving a job is you want to make sure that the job aligns with your values and priorities. And when it doesn't, it's a real good time, right, to think about leaving the job. And the other thing that I would say is these are all things that I considered ahead of time. So I probably reevaluate my priorities and values every couple of years, because they change, right, as you grow and as new things happen to you, as you gain stepchildren, right? Money all of a sudden becomes more important than it was, before. So your values and your priorities change, and so I reevaluate those every couple of years so that I know ahead of time what the trigger is for me to go. So just to answer the question though, the 5 things that'll make me leave a job are the work, the manager, the culture, the company, or I've just got had a significant opportunity present itself. And there's lots of things that go into that. But those are really the 5 reasons why I would leave a job, and they're aligned with my priorities and my values.
You made a distinction there between culture and company. Could you explain that?
Yeah. So when I think about culture, I think about like mission, vision, values, the work environment. Is it healthy? Right? Are managers living the values that are espoused? And are they rewarded for that? So are there managers that maybe are meeting and exceeding their goals, like they're knocking it out of the park, but they're also leaving 30 dead bodies in their wake and everybody's okay with that? Or are they knocking it out of the park, but they're also making sure their people are cared for, understood, seen, and heard, right? And they're living, what those values are. So that's what I would say for culture. Also, I would say maybe it's diverse, but also inclusive, right? People say D&I all the time, and the diversity part is super easy. The inclusion part is not, right? So are they inclusive? So all that is the culture stuff. For the company, I would say, is the revenue growing year over year, right? Is the industry innovative or is it dying? Is our client base increasing or decreasing? Does the company have a plan for growth, and are they sharing that plan with us as employees? Are there things like frequent layoffs or salary or hiring freezes? And do I respect our leadership team, right? And what they're saying and doing out in the community, especially now with all the things that are going on in the world. What my CEO says is important to me, when I think maybe in the past it may not have been that important, right? So that's my distinction between culture and company.
Okay. I always thought the two were inseparable. That's a very good way to make the distinction.
How long does it take for you to find the true nature of these things at a job? Like, how long at a job does it take you to find out how the culture is or how the company is? Or, well, I guess the company as you go along, but
Right.
Like the culture and other things.
It's a great question. I mean, for me, and part of it, for me, it's actually fairly easy because I'm in HR. HR is usually the heartbeat of the company, right? We're the pulse. So we kind of know what's going on when other people don't know what's going on. So for me, within the first 90 days, I can kind of see where I'm at. And really, I ask the kind of questions in an interview they're going to tell me what your culture is like before I get there. And just like everybody else, I do my research. I look at the articles that are written about the company. Most of the companies that I've worked for are publicly traded, so they have a whole kind of their employee value proposition is out there, whether they're into sustainability or not. All those things are kind of out there. So I do a lot of research, but being in HR, you hear about things and know about things going on in the company well before anybody else does. So for me, it's been about 90 or so days. You kind of have a good understanding of where you are.
Makes sense.
Roger, when do you feel it's time for you to leave a job?
I've never actually broken down the reasons the way that Tessa has, but I do agree with the order that she put them in, what she put out. For me, I didn't know what I didn't know, especially in that first job. You get out of college and you're like, I just want to work. I want to get ready for these, student loans and things like that, and try to support myself. And so when I came in, I was very, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, like looking to do something, looking to do this theoretical good that you can think of to support the company and whatnot. And as you get in there, then you start noticing some things. So something for me was I felt underutilized, and I'm like a big doer. And so if I'm sitting at my desk and don't have anything to do, it feels wrong. It doesn't feel right. And so I started asking for work. That was kind of like you guys are a big company. Where's the work? And why is it not getting passed down? So that's where I found a situation such as, Bryan, I don't know if you remember, we had a lot of senior level people doing a lot of the work. And because they were so heavy handed there, they never passed down any training to us. And these weren't guys who were just in their 40s, these are 60, 70-year-old SMEs who are getting ready to retire. So I noticed the funnel of work wasn't coming down to me. Another thing that I appreciate you said was manager and culture, because sometimes the two go hand in hand, where you have a situation where people are okay with complaining every morning or starting the day off with, blaming somebody else or something of that nature. And then when you pair that in tandem with a manager, I had the experience of being with someone who I think was very good at their job. But when it came to managing, it was very dictator-like. And, if it was a good day, it depended on that person's emotions. And it was tolerated. And I know it was tolerated because I've talk to people in other management levels, and they just say that's how this person is, and so on. So those flags, I'm like, you guys tolerate it because the work's good, but the relationship with other employees or coworkers, things like that, isn't really valued as long as the work's getting done. Like you said, mowing down 30 people just to reach your goal.
Yep.
So those kind of things are very apparent. But I would also make the point of putting them in their own category. Another way of looking at it is you have the immediate things that aren't really good for your work health, let's call it. And then in an ideal situation, everything could be great, and yet you still feel like it's time to leave a job. And what are those categories? That's where we start getting into aligning with your own personal goals. Where do you want this vehicle to take you? What opportunities are there? That kind of deal. So I would say my first 2 jobs were deep experience with learning the field, sure, but learning how important culture is and how that affects the people that you work with, how that affects the energy when you step into an office, back when we used to step into offices, and those kind of things. And then my current job with a company called Frontier Technology, and I've noticed the systematic way information is spread, the awareness that we have, the all hands with CEO to be even in conversation with somebody at a C-level, the way information is transferred from him to multiple organizations. By that I mean like subsections, because we have contracts across the country, and the fact that we all get the same information and we all get it the same way and there's no miscommunication, those kind of things are good green flags to look at if you're looking for a jump, because you never want to reactively leave somewhere and then put yourself in the same situation without understanding why it's not a good match for you. I said a lot there. I think I'll take a quick pause.
I want to ask a follow-up question based off of that. So initially you said underutilization, and so that's directly in line with who you are and what I know about you. And so how much of a factor did that play in your most recent career shift?
The most recent career shift, I would say, was less of underutilization, but more of not being able to optimize. So there comes to a point, at least in my last position, where I was working directly with the customer, and customer has certain requirements, and you want to meet those requirements. And as someone doing the work, you're kind of in the weeds. You see why these requirements can't be met. And I'm never one to say I can't do it and call it a period. I say I can't do it because here's what they need, here's how long it would take, here's how much time we have on the contract, and we don't have the manpower to do so. Unless we're all working 16-hour days, which we're not going to start doing because of the way the contract is set out. We wouldn't get paid for it. And so what I do is I typically look to my chain of command and say, hey, I'm doing the work. Great, I'm fine with talking about it, but I need you as the manager supervisor to bridge the gap between customer requirements and what we are actually set out to do. And what I was getting was a lot of, no, we're not going to add people to the team, or if we do, it'll be too late. I was on a team that started with, let's say, 2 people, me and the manager, got another person, then they moved that person, and then 3 people quit, and then 2 people came on. So within a span of a year, I'm now the senior person, and we still have the same problems, even though we've been talking about the problems since the beginning. So when I start seeing poor optimization of resources, that's kind of a flag for me. Especially with such a small team, everybody needs to be utilized effectively for it to work and be cohesive.
It's so interesting what you said, Dondre, because that whole mastery thing, it's really the underutilization of skills is something I would call mastery. So there's a guy out there, his name is Daniel Pink. I don't know if any of you all have ever heard of him. He's kind of a foremost expert on motivation, and he wrote a book called Drive, and he talked about, the 3 things that really motivate employees. And he wasn't talking about things like compensation or work-life integration. Those kinds of things are hygiene factors, right? I'm not going to take a job if I don't think you're paying me enough, right? I'm not going to take a job if I'm not going to have some of the flexibility that I need based on whatever is going on in my life, right? The reasons why I stay at a job, and this is what Daniel Pink said, was around autonomy, right? So, do I have autonomy about how I get my work done? Do I have autonomy around my time? Do I have autonomy around, if you're a leader, right, around my priorities and my team's priorities? Do I have autonomy over my tasks and activities, right? So, Dondre, when you get up in the morning, are you deciding what you're working on that day versus somebody else deciding what you're working on that day? But where what you said struck me is the second piece that he talks about is mastery. And it's around, do I have the opportunity to learn new skills? Can I grow in my role or move to other roles to grow? Like, not necessarily up, but can I do a lateral move that'll also get me the information I need so that when it's time to go up, I can? And are my skills being fully utilized, right? That's a big one. There are people out here that have a lot of different skills, and a manager, if they're not fully utilizing those skills, they're not only failing that employee, they're failing themselves, because that employee can do a lot of good with whatever skill it is that they're bringing. And the third thing is just purpose, right? He talks about, is this job fulfilling what I believe my purpose is in life to do, right? But the mastery thing is so important, because if you're a doer, right? And Dondre, I'm a doer as well. So if you're a doer and people are not letting you do, that's a huge demotivator, because a lot of times people that are doers see their value to the organization is what they produce. And if you're not producing anything, you don't feel like you're adding value.
Completely agree. I've been in project situations where I'm like, yeah, we could do this, and if we start this, and so on and so forth, and you get into the managerial conversations of, oh no, we can't do that because the contract says this, just do this, and then you really want to kind of like just push the work away. Tell me what you want, because everything that I want to do is not what you want me to do. Which gets us into the conversation of over delivering and getting into contractual limitations, is what I'll call them, because sometimes they word these things so generically, and I understand it's a business, but at the same time, like you said, we're doers, so we want to do something, and we kind of attach ourselves to the things that we do. So when we're not able to do that, it becomes frustrating, and so you look for other places that allow you that autonomy to do so.
Yep, 100% agree.
Dondre, when you started off, there was a specific word you use, and this is something that I often use when I speak about career moves and navigating my professional life, and it was vehicle. So I want to clarify what exactly that means for me and in the context that Dondre was using. So I look at careers as a vehicle. It is a specified, I look at it as an object that gets you from one place to another. And once the vehicle does not function, once it stops getting me to where I need to go, or once I arrive at the destination, it's time for me to get out. And I think it's a mindset shift that is required for you to properly navigate this. So I think I know that the correct time for you to leave a job is when the agreement is no longer beneficial. And so whether it be you hitting a ceiling or when the company is no longer aligned with your values, like Tessa said, either one of those things or a multitude of other reasons. But really think about that employment is a contract between the employer and the employee. And this is the equivalent of a business merger. So think about yourself as a business. And you bet when Microsoft and Apple, when they have their partnership, they have extensive negotiations. It's not just, oh, hey, you want to work. It wasn't a handshake deal. This was a very expensive vetting process. And so when it comes to any job that I take, specifically in the last two that I had, I vetted the hell out of them. I had more questions for them during the interviews than they had for me. The last job that I just took, I had 3 pages of notes by the time I finished my interview process with them, just because I wanted to make sure that it was beneficial for me and alignment with my goals. And Tessa, you said something that was very poignant or pointed as well, in the fact of you know what your values are beforehand because you are able to identify the trigger when it's time for you to lead. So something starting out in my career younger, when I was first out of school, and speaking to you about negotiating for my first salary and then moving forward and then doing it myself, that was a learning process. But I didn't think to ask you about identifying my at what point would I cash out, essentially.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's acquired through experience because it varies across the individual. You might have a higher tolerance for one particular thing than I do. Maybe your point where you say, I don't need this anymore, is when they want you to come back to the office, which for a lot of people that has been the point.
Yeah.
But often it's a mix. So like when I left my last job, it was a list of I think 8 total reasons, but there was one straw that broke the camel's back, ultimately to say. So people will tolerate a lot more than it appears. Like people always say that, okay, well, it was just this one factor. It's like, no, there were X amount of things before they reached that point. And so I'll go into a little more detail about what I specifically did there. So when I was saying that it's a beneficial partnership for both parties, and ideally, what I meant by that is that your goals should overlap with the company's in some form or fashion and allow you to move forward. So if there's a certain skill set that the job is going to allow you to achieve, if there are certain titles, certain certifications, certain accomplishments, things like that are going to be beneficial into your overarching goal, then it's a go. And always, like you said, that's a really important thing to evaluate on a frequent basis, whether it be every few months, a quarter, every few years. Is this an alignment? Because if you aren't, that's how you get stuck in the same, essentially a rut.
Mm-hmm.
And with my last job, I'll break it down in how I made that assessment. So I worked for a great company. It was a startup when I first joined in 2019. They weren't brand new, but they were newer, so closer to the startup before the venture capitalist backing. Brilliant software company, great product, and I saw it grow from being a small company and then getting the venture capitalist backing, which for people who aren't familiar, that's when a private equity company, they invest a large amount of money because they believe in the company's vision for a return on their money. And so with that comes differences because they'll often bring in new executives to help lead the company, to shape the company in ways that the previous leadership weren't able to. For example, our first CEO, he was a brilliant software guy, but he admittedly said that he wanted to focus on building the software. He did not really care for being the figurehead of an organization, scaling it, because that wasn't his thing. He wanted to write code, which is great. That takes a self-awareness for you to arrive and admit to that. So the venture capitalist folks, they brought in a CEO. They brought in several candidates we interviewed and selected him, and that's the process that the company changed. I saw the company change from small to growing pains and getting ultimately to where it was before I left. But through that process, I learned a tremendous amount. So one of the biggest things was in alignment with my goals, specifically. So my primary goals for the immediate future were the acquisition of a home, like purchasing a house, not living in someone's apartment, renting it out, and then capital for investing. So those are my 2 priorities. And when I looked at that job, at a certain point, it's like, okay, I had been promised things financially, essentially from the company, said, okay, we're going to evaluate raises in December, and then HR snatched the rug under my manager. They snatched the rug from underneath my manager and other individuals and kept delaying and delaying it. And my goals, they can't wait. I will not sacrifice my goals for anyone. So that was ultimately what made me consider and be open to alternate opportunities, because that was where my goals were. So as long as I was moving towards, I was fine. And I think that's something that managers need to be aware of with their employees. And then also there were other things that I had noticed as well, like lack of concerns being heard. So I looked at the rate of retention. And so, I mean, there's different reasons that might be the case, but I saw the speeding up of people starting to exit the company, and everybody has their own things. And I assumed that most of them, it was very similar. It wasn't in alignment with their goals. It wasn't just over, oh, I don't like X, Y, and Z. It was something that was a legitimate reason, like a better career move that's for them. Because like something Des said a long time ago that stood out was that people are always going to do what's in their best interest, whether it's in a timely fashion or not. That's a different thing entirely. But truly, I do believe that. And also poor contract structure. So when the sales department, when they negotiate a deal and the ink is dry, the services department, they're obligated to fulfill that. So whether it's favorable or not, you have work to do. And so when I see a pattern of that not necessarily being fulfilled in a way that protects the department that I'm a part of, that makes it hard, because as a manager, my job, I feel like, is to protect my developers and people that work on my team. And if I'm unable to do that, I don't feel great about that. That really bothers me, because I'm not able to fulfill my obligation. And as a consequence of those two things, you see structural concerns start to come up. So a noticeable hollowing out effect. So when you have people of a certain amount of seniority, I think at maybe the 2-year mark, which is when people are really proficient with the software, those people left. So we had, everyone was under a year of experience or over a year of experience, but we didn't have the people in the middle. So what happens when you have a hollowing out effect of individuals leaving like that is that it puts more pressure on everyone else in the hierarchy, from management to the other developers. And those are all things that I considered, and I didn't feel like I was in alignment with the directions that they're going. Like, I still believe in the software, it's great, but it's just that it wasn't, I could not see myself fitting into their goals on their timeline. I didn't see that as mutually beneficial. So of course, like, I wish the best for the company, but I think a lot of us have this imaginary figment in which that we are loyal to this company. And I don't mean that you shouldn't be a good employee. I don't mean that you shouldn't contribute meaningfully, but you also have to recognize that you're just as important, if not more important, when it comes to these kinds of conversations, these kinds of just navigating this, because the company's going to do fine without you. I mean, well, they might not do fine, but the company will continue to exist with or without one of us, like whatever you're doing for the most part. So just by having that perspective in mind and truly pursuing what it is that you feel that you need to be doing to be more in alignment with your true self, it's more rewarding. It's allowed you to reach your goal a lot faster, and ultimately it's better for you from a mental standpoint. Because Dondre, as you said, with your underutilization, you don't feel great about that. It's a tremendous internal conflict when you aren't able to reach your goals. Like I could imagine just being resentful if I was to stay somewhere longer than I had to and wasn't able to meet my financial goals that I had. That's a terrible feeling. I didn't want that. I was able to project in the future and think, okay, how does this end up? And that's not somewhere that I wanted to be. So I guess that was a thorough explanation for how one arrives to that conclusion, specific in myself. But just to reiterate, I feel like it should be a mutually beneficial agreement between the employer and the employee. And once that's no longer the case, whether it be you outgrow it or whether it be that somebody's not fulfilling the commitment, then I feel like that's time to move.
You know, one of the things that you are demonstrating for me is the reason why I absolutely love this generation, because you all are seeing what generations before you did not see, that this is a contract, right? This is a mutual contract between a business and an employer. And we all know that employers, when the contract is no longer beneficial for them, will do whatever they need to do. But sometimes people, especially in earlier generations, mine included, I'm a Generation X, so I'm in my early 40s, and baby boomers did not, that loyalty was like a thing, right? Regardless of what was going on, I want to say that I, worked for this company for 30 years. And what this newer generation is demonstrating is what it always has been. This is a contract. And when the contract is not mutually beneficial, then I'm going to move on. And employers are having to catch up with that because previous generations just did not do that. So I guess my question for you all is, what's the catalyst for that? Why do you think you all are thinking that way versus my generation and the previous generations did not think that way?
That's really interesting. I noticed the generational difference from, I remember when I left my first job, when I was doing contracting for the Department of Defense, and my dad and my granddad, they had a conversation. I think my granddad was like, no, he doesn't need to leave. He needs to stay there and get benefits, and like the old-fashioned mindset.
Yep.
My dad explained to him that this is not how we do things now. We go from not just hopping from job to job, but as you move throughout your career, it's okay to leave companies, but each one you go to, you acquire more tools and skills that allow you to be or reach whatever your goal is. And so I think the generational thing, it's undeniable. And I think what drove me to get there is just recognizing that I had aspirations that were so much bigger than what I could offer to a company. I felt like my contributions as an individual, the ideas that I had up here, were more important for me to materialize than helping somebody else achieve their vision. And so I think we are, for better and worse, I do feel like we are more selfish as a generation. And like in instances like this, I feel like it's certainly more helpful. And in other episodes, as I've said before, it could really bite us in the ass. But if you want my take on that, I think it's because we are more selfish in knowing our value, and also understanding that there's life outside of whatever corporation. We aren't married to any particular company that we're with.
What about the rest of you? Do you guys have any opinion on that?
I'll jump in, and I'd say I don't think we're of the same mindset of being taken care of, if that makes sense. Like I think the older mindset is you hear the term good company, and they take care of you and they give you benefits and you get your 401k. And if anything, I think all of us have seen how the foundational layout that has been taught to us maybe from our parents or something, it doesn't quite exist for us in the same way. I can't say it's completely removed, but it doesn't exist in the same way, which makes us more reactive. It makes us more aware of new opportunities to kind of get to that point in our perceived way of quicker or something of that nature. So when I'm with a company, I'm not thinking I need to be with you guys for a few years. I'm thinking, like Bryan said, how long is this contract going to last? How long am I going to be engaged and feel like we have the same values and compensated for the work that I feel like I'm doing? Because we all know when we're I don't want to say overworking, but more so like putting more into the job than maybe we know for a fact we can get by with, because we're on a team. We see what people are putting out. We know we're putting out more. We know we're putting out better products and better features and better results and things of that nature. So when that isn't as valued or reciprocated as quickly as we think it should, that is also indicative of it's time to get going. And then Bryan can speak to it in the type of field that we had. It wasn't uncommon for turnaround, or in IT in general, it's not uncommon for turnaround to happen. It just so happens to be that when we do have some kind of turnover or something of that nature, we're able to get a pay increase, which essentially, isn't like we only want the money, but Bryan wants to buy a house. He wants to invest more. That is a foundational thing where even if I'm continuing to spend what I'm spending or even less, like any more money would be helpful. So at the bare minimum, it's more of an incentive to move. And we find certain situations where, you have an inflation rate each year, which is things that we are very aware of, even at our age. Like we understand a 2% increase in pay for the amount of work that we're putting in sometimes over the 40 hours for someone else's dream, like we talk about, is not going to account for the fact that there's going to be some type of inflation. And when I could skip that 2%, 5% if I'm lucky, and go make 10, 12% plus more just for leaving a job, or even making a lateral movement in the company or something, you're going to be more keen to those kind of things. I definitely feel like there's a rush, or for lack of a better word, like a pressure behind it, because we, again, have been told this type of foundation. You get a good job, you get the 401k, you get the life, and so on and so forth. You get to do the things you want to do. But the caveat is you got to wait till you're 65, and that's if everything stays the same. And in our generation, we've realized things are not the same, and they keep changing, and you will get left behind if you don't change with it.
Yeah, I think part of it is experience too, because I know I always say, since I'm the last child, I can see everything my brothers and sisters have done and learn from their mistakes and everything like that. So I think it's experience. We, as a generation, we learn from the older generations of what, like, this hasn't been working for you guys, so we should do something different, you know what I mean? And I think that's a big thing. And the other thing I think is resources. I think we have more resources, whether it's like social media, like you see jobs on social media, you have Indeed now. It's just other ways to get jobs, and then the leverage. We have more leverage now. So I think it's definitely a mixture of all those things. What do you think, Des?
Yeah, I was going to say, first and foremost, this has been the first time in a long time that I've been a part of the conversation where I'm just a fan of everything you guys are saying. Because normally I'm doing all the talking, so to hear you guys talk and provide so much, and not to say that to put a spotlight on myself, but this is like one of the first podcasts where I can sit back and not talk at all and really enjoy, the substance of the conversation. So first and foremost, thank you for that. But for me, I think that you guys are hitting at an umbrella, and it's just the valuation of time. Everything you guys have said goes under the concept of just our valuation of time. And that's the big thing for me. Similar to what, Josh said, exposure to more information, Indeed, social media, whatever it may be. But I think the biggest thing, what hits the nail on the head for me, because as a kid, I had a hard time understanding the concept of a 9 to 5, just going to work, dreading the work that you're doing, coming home to a family. And so I think it's mental health awareness. And it's not just mental health awareness as far as the person, but generational mental health awareness, to where you're realizing how that job may have negatively impacted your parents and how they came home, and the emotions that they put into the child were either lackluster or things of that nature. So I think, just from our awareness and the ability, for me specifically, is to look at all possible aspects. Like, that's not something that I want for myself. So if the company that I'm working for isn't filling me up every day, or I'm leaving drained more than I came in, then, it's not for me. And I think it's also just, the economic evolution, like you guys are saying, like our awareness to all factors going around, whereas beforehand we might have just been in the dark or willfully ignorant. Like we have more information coupled with an economic evolution, to where we're seeing all the possibilities, more entrepreneurs, or even if it's not more entrepreneurs, it's just more of an awareness of the processes that goes with entrepreneurship, to where, maybe you aren't an entrepreneur, but you understand the power, like you guys are saying, of that contract, and that with you being the employee, you're coming in to extract the most possible and getting the best, value of yourself while you're in that position, instead of just coming in and doing the work, not loving the work, and, feeling lackluster, living lackluster.
I really do think that you all as a generation are doing it the right way, because we just didn't. Something struck me, Desmond, that you said, you talked about the wellness piece, and wellness is popular now, but wellness has not always been popular. And to be quite honest, when wellness kind of first became a subject, I was like, what is this? This is somebody from HR. What is this mumbo jumbo? Like, go to work, do what you need to do, go home, right? And the more I thought about it, and I thought about my own wellness, like I've led global teams for a long time. And Bryan's dad has spoken to me about this a lot. You sit in this office for 16 hours. You start at 5 a.m. because you got conversations with somebody in China, but then you also have a 9:30 p.m. conversation with somebody in Japan. And you got somebody in India, and then you got your West Coast people that you have to try to get to after 5. And so you're working from 5 to, 9, 10, or 11, and I thought it was normal. As a matter of fact, I wore it as a badge of honor. What a big dummy. Right? Just dumb. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, I am not well. During those years, I probably gained about 50 or 60 pounds, right? Just sitting and being on those calls all day and doing all this stuff. And when, COVID hit, I was like, ooh, I gotta do something different. Wellness finally became, a forefront in my mind, but with this generation, it always has been. And so I love the way that you guys are doing this. I love the way that you're approaching it. It's causing companies a lot of angst, right? Because they got to do something different. And, a lot of these companies are like battleships. They got to turn 10 miles out. They're not a dinghy. They can't just turn immediately. And so it's causing them a lot of angst, but I think it's the right way. I think it's important for you to think about what your priorities are and make that forefront. It's important to think about your wellness, right? Your health is wealth. If you're not healthy, no matter how much money you have, you are not going to have a good life, right? So I just love the way you guys are inspiring me. Like, I love the way you guys are talking about this and how this is just like your everyday. Like, this is just what you do. Versus for me, these are things that I'm learning about just recently, right? So I'm super proud of what you guys are doing and super proud of how you're moving. I think it's awesome.
I have a question. Have you ever come up with a problem like during the interview? Because I was always told when I'm younger, like, I guess not always told, but I've heard a lot, like, you should stay with the same job for a long time because, if you go to another interview and you see I have a whole bunch of jobs, they're gonna be like, why do you have so many jobs on your resume? Like, why do you leave jobs all the time? You know what I mean? So have you ever come in contact with an issue because you said you had 10 jobs in 15 years or something like that? So yeah, have you ever had an issue with that?
I've had 10 jobs in 18 years and that issue has come up. And I have a good reason for every job that I leave. So one thing that I have been about my career is intentional, even though I always haven't been really smart, right? In terms of the wellness and some of those other things, I have been very intentional from the very beginning. And so I was always able to explain to people why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I was always able to link that to what my values and priorities are. And I was very honest with people. And sometimes folks were okay with that and sometimes they weren't. If you were to look at my resume, I actually went back and forth between 2 companies over a 10-year period. So I was at a company, I was there for 5 years. I left that company. I went to the next company. I was there for 3.5. I left that company, went back to the company that I was at, was there for 2, left that company, went back to the previous one, and was there for like 2. And so people look at that and they're like, well, why, and I said, if you think about it, it's a testament to the kind of work that I do that they would keep hiring me back and keep hiring me back at higher positions, right? So you have to be intentional and think about and have real reasons. That's the other thing. Because some people are just like, they don't have a real reason for why it's just not they're just like, F this job. I don't like it no more. Like, just kind of, and they don't really think about the reason why they're leaving. And so they can't explain it when somebody asks them, why you left this job after a year, or why you left this job after 2 years. I think for me, as long as I was able to explain it, it was fine. For you all, it really shouldn't be an issue because times have changed. I know that if I hire somebody that's probably a millennial or a Gen Z, if I'm able to keep them for 2 years, I've done a great job, right? And I should leave it at that and let them go do their next experience. So I think, now people sort of understand this whole contract that Bryan was talking about, and it's not seen as a problem. As a matter of fact, and I think you guys probably know this, but there are people, that I started with at my initial job. I worked for Ernst & Young right out of graduate school, that are still there. They never left. And I'm probably making 50% more than they are because they stayed at this company. And a lot of times when you move jobs and you move companies, a 10 and 20% raise comes with that, right? Because whatever you're going to get when you get in the door, that's what you're going to get. Because I think, Bryan, you alluded to it, those 2 to 3% raises are not going to make you rich. So whatever you want, when you go in the door, you better get it, right? So, but the loyalty thing has now become a problem, right? It's an issue if you stay someplace too long because you don't have skills, you don't have all the skills you need because there are other companies that do things differently. And so I think for you guys, it's probably not necessarily going to be an issue. You're going to run into one of those old school people every once in a while, but I just really feel like times are changing so much. It's not even a thing anymore. Like people just don't look at it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was just curious. I don't have that many jobs, but I was just curious.
You're like, I'm not a job hopper, but
yeah, I've never been I'm not that brave. I say that. I'm not that brave, just like but for me, what I had, it was pretty similar to what you guys had. I had 3 things when you feel like you plateaued, would no longer benefit you or a better opportunity presents itself. And that's what I had. My first job, it really wasn't any of those things. My first job was like a summer job, and I told Bryan about this. I was like, I worked at a psychiatric institute in New York, and I got it, and it was like a summer job, and I was only there for 2 years. It was just in the summer, so that really doesn't apply. But when I was at the bingo hall, because I worked at a bingo hall too, one thing that made me leave was there was no revenue growing, like how you said. Like I wasn't really getting raises at all. Like I think I was there, I don't even remember how long I was there. I was at least 2 years, but I never really got a raise. So but me being in college, I'm just like, if I'm doing just, riding the motion in college, so fuck it, if I get a raise, I get a raise, but if not, I'm just go to class, you know what I mean? So I was doing that. And the other thing too, I think it wasn't really inclusive. I think you said that too. It's not that it wasn't that inclusive. It was I'm not gonna go deep into it, but it was kind of an uncomfortable environment for me personally, just because the people that were in there. But other than that, then when I went to Cloud9, I ended up staying with that job and got a second job at Card because basically what I said, it was a better opportunity. I got paid more money and it was in Cloud9. I think Des can attribute to this. The pay at Cloud9 wasn't that appealing to stay. So that was really that. And the other reason why I stayed, I didn't plateau yet. So I remember the day I was going to actually put in my 2 weeks because I was like, I'm gonna go because I didn't get promoted to manager. I was like, I'm gonna go put in my 2 weeks right after this. So I come in, I'm walking to the locker room. The supervisor comes like right past me. Oh, hey Josh, what's up? I was like, oh, you good? I was thinking about promoting you to supervisor. I was thinking you wanted to know. I was like, I guess I can't leave now. I guess he just said I could promote me to supervisor. Literally that same day I was gonna turn in my 2 weeks. So I ended up staying there for a little bit just for that experience, that manager experience. So, but then when I plateaued, I was like, okay, it's time to go. I don't really need to stay here. It wasn't like that. The manager money wasn't as much I was making at Card, you know what I mean? So it was really that. And then when I left Card for Family Insight, it was just a better opportunity too, just more money and everything like that. So, and I think the culture at Card kind of came a little stained a little bit, and I didn't really like that. So that was another reason. And then the next time I went to another job, it was just a better opportunity. So usually when I job hop or when I just go to another job, it's just because it's a better opportunity, more money and stuff like that. But as far as what you guys said, as far as like, even with Bryan, he was like, he wrote notes for the interview and like he had 3 pages of notes. I think that's pretty dope. And I might have to take that from him though.
They might sign your checks, but they work for you.
Okay. That's a good
That's a great point.
If they're worth their weight in salt, they absolutely do work for you. And the other thing is, when you're interviewing them just like they're interviewing you. You could say no. You could say, you know what, you guys aren't meeting my expectations. I'm going to move on to the next opportunity. So
yeah, they rely on you needing that job, and a lot of people are like, I kind of need this job, you know what I mean? I don't want to go jobless, you know what I mean? So yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize the leverage that they have, even not just with what's happening today with inflation and everything, but they have a lot of leverage. They don't realize it, but yeah.
Especially when you're a good worker, because a lot of people, that's a commodity. It's becoming more and more rare. We understand why the job market is the way that it is, but in light of that, there's a lot of things that we could be doing to make ourselves more marketable. There's a lot of things that we could do to make ourselves more of an asset to a company. And so when you don't do your due diligence, you end up robbing yourself of future opportunities. But if you do that, as you all have done throughout your respective careers, you're able to look at opportunities and know this isn't for me. You can get another job, and that's because of the time and the skills that you have acquired over whatever span you guys want to say, whether it was Tessa's 18 years or Josh, I don't know how long you've been working, but because of the work you did, you're able to put yourself in a better position moving forward. A lot of people just go through the jobs and they don't look at the bigger picture into how they're acquiring the skills. So they're just fulfilling a task, but they're not actually looking at it as an opportunity to hone their skills in order to make themselves more valuable in the future. Like, you could go to a job, and this is something that Dondre absolutely wouldn't do. You could just go to a job and do the bare minimum and skate by. That's a job. But if you look at it as a career, you're going to look at it very differently. You're going to look at it like you're playing Madden back in the day with GM mode, where you're actually making the deals and you're more invested in the well-being of your organization. And so when you do that, you're able to better align yourself and set yourself up in the future, because you have the skills. I mean, certain things are never going to go out of style. You always need somebody who know how to manage people. You always need to know how, especially like in the tech industry, that's something I feel like I cannot overstate enough, is that is a field in which people are always going to be needed, because we're going to need people no matter how intelligent the machines are. You're going to need people to work with them. People talk about automation taking away jobs. Well, look back in like the Industrial Revolution. Most people aren't farming anymore. We aren't watching oxen pulling our carts in cornfields and tilling the soil or anything like that. It created new jobs in factories. And so the same thing is going on again. It's like, yes, we are deprecating some jobs. Yes, there might be self-checkouts, but there is a whole new sector of things open up, and there's a lot of people in a stubborn mindset, and they don't understand that we're on the cusp of a generational shift. And so it's really looking at what's available and looking outwards towards the future as a place of opportunity, as opposed to a place of restriction. I did have a question for. Oh, I don't think Des, you told us when you know it's time for you to leave. Before I ask my question.
For me, it's simple because I haven't worked a lot of jobs. I've worked probably 4 jobs altogether since I've been 18. I'm 27 now. But for me, the things that push me to leave jobs were first and foremost finances. Have I outgrown the role? And if I've outgrown the role and there's no room for growth and my finances are stagnating, then it's time to, look into a new opportunity. But the biggest thing for me is always ambiguity about future career paths. If I'm asking the question, similar to what Dondre was saying, if I'm asking these questions and I'm showing the desire to take on new tasks or new opportunities or new whatever may be within my current role, and there's no traction, then I know it's my time to go. And then I pretty much touched on it already, but culture between manager and employees. My first job, it pretty much goes in line with the ambiguity as far as career path. Like, first manager, when I got hired at the job, pushed me to, be the cashier. And as I became the cashier, I learned, how to do a proper sales pitch. I'm an introvert, so I hated talking to people, but he pushed me to step outside of that bubble. And of course, with that push comes raises, comes more money and things of that nature. And then with my second manager, I just stagnated completely and, eventually just walked off the lot. Like, I've only ever written a 2-week notice once out of the 4 jobs that I had. So at my current job, I'm at ADP. And one thing that I always look at within ADP is there's always room for growth. Every department is more or less its own business unit. It is a business unit, of course, with it being a department, but there's always different needs within each business unit to where whatever skills I'm learning, I can apply it to another department while, gaining a new skill set as well. And then I also just look at, ADP as well. ADP, we provide so much data for the economy that it's just like a great, it's a great company to work for. Like, especially with me, as if you guys have tuned into prior conversations, like, I'm very much into day trading. So I love to see the correlation between how what I'm doing in my everyday work correlates to these numbers that come out, once a month, or, the first Friday of every month, or, just your unemployment numbers altogether. Like all that stuff comes from us. So it's a lot of pride and joy per se in being part of that, 5-day-a-week process of trying to help reach these numbers per se, because it is tough. Like our sales team, they do a lot, and I'm more or less on the service technical side. Like I've been a service associate, but I'm also on the technical side now, to where I'm help creating process for our service employees to follow. So it's things of that nature. Like finances, ambiguity about career path, and the culture between manager and employees. Those are the three things that I evaluate to see if my mission at this company can be fulfilled or if it's time to go on somewhere else.
With the wealth of experience that we have on this call here, I'd like to ask to you guys, what are some of the signs that you feel like individuals should be on the lookout for when the company is in the decline phase? So things that you can see on the horizon that are going to be potentially detrimental in the long term and you should be mindful of.
I'm just trying to leave room for other people. Y'all, I think y'all could probably tell I have an opinion about this.
Oh, I know you do.
But before I speak up, I want to give somebody else a chance.
For me, I always thought it was high turnover because we have our implementation team they have a high turnover rate right now, but it's because the demand is so high. I think the one tell sign for me outside of turnover, since I don't really consider that the number one tell sign, would be the distribution of work. And I think Dondre touched on it. He had SMEs that were just holding up all that work and not properly, creating channels to where that information is funneled from, associate to associate, to where it can be passed on to those newer associates and things like that. Like the buck doesn't stop with them. I think the distribution of work, because if your manager is coming to you, even and no matter what position you're in, if it's salary or if you're hourly, if they're coming to you with more work than what you can do in your slotted time for your shifts, then I think it's time to question the ability. I wouldn't say the ability, but it's more or less the efficiency of the department or the job itself.
I'll jump in there and add on, because I agree with what you're saying. Part of it be a big flag for me if there's no. I'm a big process improvement kind of guy. So if I find we're doing the same thing the same way, and we're getting a subpar result, I'm immediately looking to improve that. And some people don't want to improve that because they're used to doing the same way, or the same thing the same way. But on the other hand, I've seen management be. I kind of look at management like I'm supposed to be able to look up to you and look at your vision and allow you to plant a seed, or at least tell me what you envision the forest will look like in the next couple of years or something of that nature, whether that's individual career roles or things of that nature, because I'm not the one telling the company where they should go. But you look to your supervisor and your manager or the CEO like to create those things. And so what I've seen in previous jobs is some kind of, let's say, negative feedback from a customer, and instead of doing a very systematic way of distributing information, distributing a plan of action, things of that nature, they change multiple things at once. And we all have some type of experience when it comes to let's say experimentation and things like that. When you change multiple variables, you never actually know what works. And so I'm very, very big on like, let's create a system, let's change one thing, let's implement that slowly and see what the result is. Because I'd much rather us have a very consistent process and consistently turn out like a C level of work. And then we can say, let's improve the process and see what the new grade is, versus us just changing everything. And now we get an A one day, we get a C one day. People leave. We got people coming in. The onboarding process stinks. Like those kind of things. They are very detrimental to long-term health of the company. And then going on with what you were saying, Des, like people not transferring over knowledge, or sometimes afraid to transfer knowledge for the sake of their own job security. Like those are big flags when it comes to long-term health and growth of the company. So I definitely agree, and that's kind of my input as well.
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bryan.
This is just a real quick one. I'd say the temperature, the morale of your peers, the people within the company. So, of course, you have to establish a baseline. Like, if you're brand new to the company, you might not have the benefit of doing this, but if you a little bit, you're gonna understand what the culture is and hopefully have networked with some individuals there. And if you see a gradual shift in towards people as a whole becoming less optimistic about the company, and then you see a mass exodus that follows that. So just seeing like the overall outlook, because I look at one individual could maybe dislike the company and or have a bad experience. But if you find that multiple people are generally changing the attitude, people who were once passionate about this, and you see that their temperature starts to change on it, I think that's something to increasingly be mindful of. If people who like were once fanatical they don't want to be there anymore, they always feel burnt out, they're always drained. That those things are usually indicative of a system that created that. No one gets burned out from one day. This is something that was long and something that accrued. So looking at those kinds of things, look at what the culture is breeding. Is it breeding positive results, or is it not long-term sustainable? I would say that a lot of people, it's easy to just keep your head down and do your work, but I think it's really important for people to be mindful of what's going on around them, and that will allow them to make wise decisions.
Yeah, so as I think about, aside from business indicators, right, some of the things that I talked about earlier, revenue increases, and we are getting new customers and not losing customers and those kinds of things. When a lot of the things that you all have talked about have made me think about organizational design, because it's some of what the company that I work for now is grappling with, where we have these jobs, we've made them too big, especially in terms of leadership, and people don't have time to manage their teams, right? They have the day of the manager sitting in the room and just orchestrating what happens is kind of gone. That's not a thing anymore, right? Most managers are player coaches. So not only do they have their own projects and their own jobs, but then they have to manage the projects and jobs of other people. But what we have done is made these jobs way too big. And so they're not able to spend time with their people. And my general rule is a manager should be spending 50% of their time with their team. And we've designed these jobs in such a way that they cannot do that. And that's why you see, all of the skills staying with the manager and they're not being pushed down, right? Or you could also see that just because of a value system, right? People believe at this organization that if they have all the knowledge, they're the ones that will be promoted. Where at other organizations, it's more valued when you share your knowledge. So that plays into the knowledge piece as well. So it makes me think about organizational design. It makes me think about the morale piece is also really big, right? And one thing that we hear about a lot right now is burnout. People are tired. They are tired, right? But I think that's just across the board with COVID and all of the upheaval and unrest and all the things that are happening generally. And then people get to work and their jobs are just overwhelming and there's too much going on and they're burned out, they're done, right? And then managers aren't able to spend any time with them and help them work through that. So it just becomes this big endless cycle. And then you got the mass exodus, right? The great resignation, because people are starting to reevaluate all of those things. So, I would agree with everything that you guys said. And I really think that it's on the onus of leadership to start designing these roles better, to start valuing when managers can spend time with their employees versus just getting all this work done, right? Because that's why you have a team, so that they can help you get work done. But these player coach roles, the player piece has become too big and the coaching piece has become very, very small. And so employees don't feel like they're supported by their manager. They don't feel like they're empowered. They don't feel like they're getting anything, learning anything from their manager. So, I think everything that you guys said, and then leadership, just really looking at how are we designing this thing? How are we designing this thing in such a way that people will not be burned out, that wellness is important, that people can log off at 5 and go home and work with their family and be with their families and cook dinner and take their kids wherever they got to go. all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know that I added anything extra, but I said all that to say I agree with you guys.
You brought up something. You said the onus is on management. So this is something when I was giving leadership presentations at my former company, and I had spoke about this. I forgot what was the source that initially brought this up, but it was some author who was really proficient in the leadership space or a podcast on the subject, maybe like John C. Maxwell.
Uh-huh.
But so the idea is dispelling the myth that everyone is a lifer. And from a management perspective, when I said that, I don't think that some people recognize the gravity of what I was saying, but I don't think everyone did. And so what I meant by that is when you think that everybody is going to be at your company for life, you take it personal when they want to leave. And so that becomes taboo for them to have those kind of discussions. But when you understand that everyone is not going to be a for-lifer employee, it allows you to make the arrangement, the agreement, as I said earlier, more beneficial for both people. So if I know that Dondre wants to be a CEO, he wants to run his own company, but he's currently doing analyst work, okay, maybe I can make this more beneficial. I can make him more invested by finding something that will give him some skills and impose it that way to him to make it something that he could get more gain from. So Dondre, maybe we need some help with, I guess, analyzing financial data instead of utilization. Okay, that's something that maybe a CEO might need to know. They will need to know how to read charts, read data, and create those things and speak to people. So Dondre might not be with the company for 20 years. He doesn't have to, but if he is there for whatever time he is there, he gets the most out of the agreement, and then we get the most out of it. I think a lot of people are scared of that, and like that's really a generational thing. But when you really embrace it as opposed to run from it, it changes that. Because I mean, whether you want to accept it or not, people are not going to just take your jobs. People leave all the time for various reasons. And I remember one of the guys at my job, the CTO, I respect him tremendously. He said something to me that really stood out from that day back in like 2020. He had said that one day people he's not going to be able to afford people like me and my boy Jay, shout out to Jay, and some of the other guys that were going through leadership training. So one day we're not going to be able to afford you. You guys are going to do bigger and greater things. And he understood that, and that caused me to respect him a lot more, because he recognized the value in us individuals, and he understood the nature of the agreement between the employee and the organization. So I think that's effective leadership, or just understanding that. Like, you can't expect somebody to go harder for your vision than you are. If I'm the owner of X company, I have to understand that maybe my chief of marketing, or maybe my developer or something, they might want to go do something. That is fine. But regardless of that, I have a goal to reach, and they have a goal to reach. So I think having a mutual respect and an understanding to shying away from those conversations is more beneficial than what most people would tend to do. Is like, okay, we're afraid to have an honest conversation with our manager about our long-term career goals, because we feel like we're going to be on the chopping block. Well, if you're scared to be honest with your manager, why the hell are you there?
That's a very good point. I'll just jump in and add on, because I'm glad you said, go write down mutual benefit between the company and the employer needs. And that, going back to a previous question that we had, that's probably one of the green flags or opposing red flags if you're not able to have that. Recently, like in my career, I am doing a lot of analyst work. I am doing a lot of testing and peer reviewing and things of that nature. And because I'm so inundated with process and things like that, I've developed an interest for managing projects. And so it's very important to me that I should be able to talk to my supervisor and say, hey, I have an interest in this. And I'm not going to just come to you with a problem and say, I need you to fix it or I'm going to leave. Like, that's not utilizing my resources appropriately. But what I did do in our previous supervisor employee meeting was I came to him and I said, I'd like to start getting into this. Do you have any project manager efforts on your plate right now that you would be willing to pass off to me, so I can not only dip my toe in the water and get familiar with the type of work, but if your plate's too full, I can take that off of you. I'm saying I want to do these things, and even if me getting that knowledge puts me in a situation to be ready for another job, let's say by the end of the year or something like that, it's like, oh well, if I didn't help Dondre with this, maybe he would have been with us longer. It's like, yeah, but you helping me with this helped you with this. And so now we got that mutual benefit, regardless of what happens at the end of the year or the next year or something of that nature. And so I really do feel like companies should be more willing to do that rather than hurt the employee passively just to keep them there longer, because it's only going to build up the resentment. So yeah,
think win-win as opposed to win-lose, and
right,
that could be seen or manifested in the mindset of being fearful of overtraining people. So if we give them these qualifications, well, oftentimes it's the other way around, because people hit their ceilings and then they feel like, okay, I need to go somewhere else to grow, as opposed to a company providing that opportunity for them in-house.
What you guys are talking about is a major paradigm shift, right? Because for so long, people valued knowledge, and whoever was the most knowledgeable was promoted or moved up the ladder. But really, what is happening now with this newer generation is they want to know more. They want to learn more. They want to have more skills. And so managers are having to change that paradigm. For me, and the company that I work for now, I'm the head of global talent management. And so, one of the things that I've put into place is that if you don't have a successor that is ready now, you cannot be promoted. We are going to value, right, making sure that we have a bench of individuals that can take, because if you get hit by a bus tomorrow, I want to be able to, because I'm the corporation, I want to be able to go to that bench and say, Desmond, you're next. You're ready now. Let's go. Right? And that might be a really cold way to think about it, but it's also making sure that the people under you are developed and that they're doing the things that they want to do, and that you're giving them the opportunities to do the things that they want to do. Like Dondre was saying, because as a leader, and here's the other thing, you cannot only think about your department, you have to zoom up and you have to think about the organization. So no, Dondre, I don't have any project management things, but my counterpart over here, he's got this project that is coming and he's pretty overwhelmed right now. And I'm going to talk to him about passing this down to you, right? So not only thinking about your little silo, but really looking at the organization as a whole. But to me, those are the people that are leaders. If you're only worried about your little area, I'm glad that you're worried about your area and you're doing a good job. But if you can't branch out and work across the enterprise, then you're not that valuable, right? So I think it's really important that leaders change that paradigm and start to develop the people under them. And one of the things that we're doing is, because it's a value for us, is just saying, if you don't have a ready now successor, sorry, I don't care if you are the number one candidate. You're not, because when you get to this next role, we can't depend on you to develop the next successor. So we're not going to move you. And until you do that, and that's going to be a discussion that everybody has together in some sort of talent review. It's not going to be you that says, oh, I have a successor now, 2 months after we didn't give you the promotion. It's going to be us having a conversation about your team and talking about their knowledge, skills, abilities, wisdom, judgment, all the things. Are they ready? And if they are, and we have a role open for you, wonderful. But until that happens, you're going to stay right where you are. And if you leave because of that, then sorry. But we value making sure that people are ready and promoted and are able to do other things. We don't leave people in a role for more than 3 years. Time and role for us is really important. And if you're in a role longer than 3 years, there's a problem. Something's wrong.
You kind of remind me of my my old/new supervisor. I say old because she was at my other job, and I say new because she's at the new job I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good thing, don't worry. But I have a question. You mentioned this generation, you praise our generation, but I have to ask, and you mentioned burnout too. How much is it burnout, and how much is it we just fucking lazy?
So, I think there's probably some of that. There's some of the, I don't want to work that hard out there, but I honestly don't think it's the majority. I personally haven't run into a bunch of lazy folks in this generation. What I've run into is people that work smarter, not harder.
Okay.
Right? So they're thinking about their work differently, And managers get upset because they can do what they've been assigned in 4 hours where everybody else is taking 8. Well, that's your fault. It's not theirs, right? They're smart about how they do their work, and maybe they don't want to work till 5 every day. And so as long as they're getting the result, I don't care. But a lot of managers do care about that. So I don't know that I would necessarily say it's lazy. I would just say there is some of that. But I would say the majority of this generation, they're just innovative. They think about their work differently. They find faster ways to do it. And people have a problem with that. So, they're done 8 to 12, their work is done, and they're off walking their dog or doing whatever. And people have a problem with that. And I'm like, as long as I get the result, so what?
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else you have, Bryan?
Yeah, I wanted to just ask before we wrap things up here, what is the one thing that you would advise people to do to improve their career trajectory? So I guess another way to put that is any career advice that you would give someone.
Is that to me or just to everybody?
It's an open free-for-all, but feel free to take it first.
I would just say be intentional. Be intentional about your career. Know what you want, and make the moves that serve you. Right? If you don't go do something if it doesn't fit within the trajectory that you want to move, even if it's like a big job that has all kinds of money, like you know what your purpose is, you know what you want to do. Take the jobs that fit your purpose, because there's a lot of people out there making a ton of money that hate going to work every day because they don't love what they do. They have zero passion around it, and they got away from what their purpose was, and weren't intentional about staying on the path that they believe is for them, and they let the money or the title or whatever kind of move them out of that trajectory, and now they're miserable. So what I would say is be very, very intentional and continue to reevaluate your values and priorities as you go about it, because that's the only way you're going to be able to stay intentional.
I'd agree with that. And I also say one thing that I've been stressing to a lot of people, whether they're people like younger than me in my field or just people that I know that are coming out of like college and things of that nature, or changing fields and things like that. I tell them all the time to understand your own value, because you're the one who's going to have to fight for yourself in these situations. No one's just going to hand you a job. And I say that very intently because you will be in situations where you're working with people who have been with the company for 5, 10, 15 years. They've made their ways up, and because they try to impressionate on you, well, I had to work super hard and I work these long hours and it's a very difficult job. So you probably have some time to wait. And they give this negative connotation of I had to do all these things. So don't even get it in your mind that you can do these things until you have done what I've done. And they might not have done it the best way. And like, Tessa, like you were saying, I don't want to say lazy, but maybe we are a little more efficient with our time, and we want to get things done quicker because there are other things that are a little more important to us. So, I tell people, don't cut yourself short. Don't act like a job's doing you a favor because they gave you an offer letter or anything like that. You need to value yourself. And if you don't currently, then it's very important that you work on the skills for both, personal and external that you need to do to feel confident in yourself to say, here's what I'm going to the job to do. Here's what I'm getting out of it. And when that contract is breached, that's when you start looking at other things. But it really starts with how much you value yourself.
I like that second part that you added about if you recognize that there is a lack of value, because that's part of the awareness of knowing your value. If you realize that you aren't able to contribute as much as you should in an organization, is seeking out the skills in order for you to be able to do so.
I don't know. I was about to say probably a cliche like have a plan. I would say I really don't know. Have a plan, because I think it's way less scarier to not have a plan. Because when Des said he walked out on the clock, that shit is scary as hell to me. And like, I don't know if he had a plan and like a backup, like I can get this job later, but that shit's scary as hell to me. So that's why I say
to walk out.
Wait, say it again.
He planned to walk out.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I don't know. But I hear that all the time. He's not the first person I heard say that. Like I've heard someone say like they never even show up at all. Like not just for like 2 jobs he's in, like all the jobs. So it's just scary to me. So I think probably have a plan, know what you're gonna do afterwards, whether it's temporary or whether it's permanent. Just have a plan. I would say.
Des, you have any career advice you want to leave us with?
Yeah, so I know his is have a plan. Mine is actually the same thing, but it's have a plan in the sense of understanding your role, how to get from point A to point B, and from point B to point C. Don't just go in and do the role, understand the role, the ins and outs of it. Essentially understand it to the point where you can teach it or pass it down, like Tessa was saying, to the next person. Because as she was going on about, not giving promotions unless you had a successor, it reminded me so much of my most recent promotions where like I had to pass down my roles between 3 separate people because that's how much I had did. And it's like, had I had not done the grooming to teach people how to do the things that I'm passing down, the transition process for me would have been so much more harder, and I would have left a hole with that team that would have taken I was in that role for 2.5 years, probably would have took a couple months to fully fill to where someone's in the routine and in the flow of doing things. So I'll say have a plan in the sense of whatever you're doing, it's tangible and you can pass it down from person to person.
The piece of advice that I would leave, I'd like to vary it and make this a little bit more specific. This is something that I learned from Tessa, is always ask for more. When you are going into a negotiation for a job, when you're interviewing, you should always have a target. And even if they do offer you the target initially, you should always ask for more. And think about it this way. This is the single biggest opportunity you are going to get in order for you to significantly raise your salary. Otherwise, you're typically going to get an annual review, which might be 4% is I guess average from what I read. And so you're not gonna. This is probably, like I said, your biggest opportunity for you to get $10,000, $20,000 increases. And so if you don't take advantage of that, that's an opportunity you're gonna regret. And I want to say, especially for women, I understand like a lot of people, like we understand that there are for one reason or another that there's a common issue with pay disputes with women. And I experienced that with a developer that I had. She was a woman, duh. But so she was getting paid less than her male counterparts in the role, and she had came to me to discuss that. And I asked her one thing. I asked her, did she ask for more? And she said no. But I asked her, did the other guys ask for more? And because they're really close, and they told her that yes, they did ask for more. And I want to leave, especially like I said, the women viewers. And I tell my sister as she's about to graduate from university, and she already has a career, but as she continues to move forward throughout her professional career, always ask for more. Don't allow yourself to inhibit the opportunities presented to you, and really understand the gravity of that opportunity that's presented to you when you take on a new job, especially if you are a quality individual and they like you. Because if you are a valuable asset and the company wants to have you, you have leverage, and they are more willing to meet you where you want to be. So I want to impart that to our viewers.
Did they ask for more during the interview? And she did?
No, not during the interview. During the after the offer letter was
oh, okay.
So they gave the offer letter, and this is something that some people just out of school, but I know that a lot of women aren't as assertive for whether it be fear of how it's perceived or general temperament. I don't know, but that's something that does exist. And so she did not ask for more. She just took the offer letter, signed it, and that was that. Whereas her male counterparts, they had damn near the same experience, same age, came out of school the same exact time, same degree, but they asked for more. That was the difference. And so in that regard, I told her that she did herself a disservice. And then so moving forward, I told her, make sure you always do this.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you the same thing I asked you earlier when we was talking, how do you know if it's you're asking for too much or you're not?
How do you know if you're asking for too much?
Yeah. You say asking for more. How do you know if you're asking for too much or not?
Well, first, I think that is something that you have to research depending on your individual role. So looking up the national average for one, and I don't mean just doing a quick Google search and seeing the fat ass number at the top of the Google search bar. Not. Like I'm talking, looking at some graphs, looking at multiple sources, seeing what the specifications are for the roles, and get a full encompassing picture of what exactly they're asking. And then I would look and evaluate myself and my current standing, how much I'm making, my qualifications, and then any other additional skills that I have for that. So if you understand that maybe this company might be the role might be 85,000, but you have a wealth of experience, you feel like you can contribute. I feel like you are in the right for asking for I don't know, you can 95, 105, 115. I mean, if you get too silly, they'll just tell you no. But most times they'll attempt with the first time is just a counter offer. I would not push my luck after that first rebuttal, that first counter offer. I would not push my luck after that because they might just say, okay, well, this is too much trouble. You're not being reasonable. But I think if you look at the national average and then also your state average to kind of help make yourself more reasonable with the target that you're looking to get from whatever employment it is, you're less likely to do that. Because if you were to go to Burger King to be a shift manager and tell them you want 250,000, they're gonna laugh at you. They're gonna laugh at you in your face. But if you actually did the research and saw what the national average was, the state average, and then you asked for something maybe a little bit more, and you can justify it because you have the qualifications, you have a track record, then I feel you're within your right. And if they are able to meet you, great. And if not, well, if that's really what you want, you can go somewhere else that values you.
The only thing, this is really short. Please. The only thing I would add to that is to say, give the company a range, right? Don't give them a number, give them a range. So if the example Bryan used was $85,000, and you really think it should be, between what I'm really looking for is 95,000 and 110, right? So that gives them, and really your target should generally be the bottom number.
Yes. Because
you may get more than what your target is. And so that has served me very, very well. And Bryan is correct. I've never accepted the first offer. Never, ever, ever. Not one time, even when I was early in my career. And that was partly because of my dad, right? So he kind of taught me, but I never accept the first offer. And I always come back with a range, or even if I like the offer, I'm like, well, I want more vacation, just something, right? So that they understand that I'm formidable, right? And when I come into the organization, this is the kind of tenacity that you're going to get. So it's almost a double-edged thing. So it's good for me. And they're like, oh, okay, we got a firecracker. So let's give her what she wants and get her in here.
I like the other part about the alternative for more vacation there, because I think there's other parts that could go into the negotiation as part of the offer. Like most people just look at the big number that gets broken down into, okay, you get X bi-monthly. Well, vacation, that's another thing that could be added to it. Or the bonus program. This is something that you and I had a conversation about at my first job. You had told me to see if they had a bonus program and include that in my negotiations as I was looking to move into my second job. And that's something that a lot of people don't even consider. They look at it once they're locked in, but a bonus program could make the difference between you meeting your target goal financially and not.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I asked, because me and you, Bryan, had that conversation, and I was, might be a viewer that I wanted to know. So, yeah, good information. You got something?
Yeah, real quick. I was just gonna add in. I agree with what Tessa was saying about the range is very specific, and it's something I think Bryan and I have talked about, especially when going for a new position and trying to increase your income and things of that nature. I personally always make my bottom number the increase I want to see when I leave a job. That is, so I know even if I get what they think is a minimum or whatever, this is my personal increase. Otherwise, it's not necessarily worth it, especially if the job responsibilities are going to be about the same. So I typically start with that increase, and then piling on that, they might give you the minimum, and then you give them a counter because clearly they want you already. So there's a systematic way to go about these things, and I think a lot of people understand that when especially in the IT world, they have a number, they have their own range, but you also have to understand when they're doing certain contracts, whether it's like government type contracts or other organization contracts, they get paid more than they can ever pay you just for having you in the building. So it's very important that you understand that, and you get, again, how much you value yourself at, with the understanding that there's more, there's more in the pot. So yeah, I agree.
Gotcha. All right. I want to thank Tessa and Dondre for coming on this episode. This episode was great. Really appreciate it. Come back. Definitely. I don't know if Desmond has a recommendation or a week, or you want to present the opportunity to one of our guests.
I think we could do both. I think my recommendation for the week is something that we talked about when we went out to dinner last week, and it's learning to listen to your body. So, the recommendation for the week is take some time out to actually listen to yourself, know when you're hitting your levels, know what your triggers are, things of that nature. Because for me, I've been doing intermittent fasting, and then I've increased it to a 22-hour fast a day, and I have a 2-hour eating window. And when I say that to people, they look at me sideways, like, oh, I can never do that. And it's just a matter of, for me, it's what works. I've always been this person that wants to wake up early, but eating 3 times a day has me waking up even more tired than what I was when I went to sleep. So doing the fasting the way I am, like I'm up at 5 every day. I have the most energy I've had in my entire 20s. And it's just me listening to my body, because you always will know what will work best for you, but you're following, the status quo or what system has already been put into place for generation to generation. So I think, one thing that I would always recommend, and my most important recommendation I think I've made out of all of them, is just take some time out this week to listen to your body and see what changes need to be made to, push you to be that best version of yourself.
Gotcha. All right.
The guest that recommendation.
Oh yeah,
you'd like to add as well?
I'll tag on to what Des said. On top of listening to your body, I would say set boundaries, and figure out what those personal boundaries are for yourself. Because people like to come back with, I just want to help, and I want to do everything in my power to help other people. And I've always been a big supporter of, well, I can only help for as much as I have, and if I'm helping everybody without helping myself, I have none left to give, and I'm probably doing more harm than I am helping. So it's very important to set those boundaries, refill your cup so then you can help somebody else. And that's something to definitely work on if you haven't already.
I love both of those recommendations. I might have to cut my fasting time down, Desmond, but maybe 16 hours to start.
Yeah, that's what I started off with. I did starting out, it was 16:8. I had an 8-hour window. My window opened at 12 and closed at 8. So yeah, that's what I started out with.
Okay, well that makes me feel I can start there. But in terms of my recommendation, I would say I mentioned the book earlier by Daniel Pink, Drive. It is a great book. It is about motivation and how motivation works. Since we're talking about leaving a job. My recommendation would be to go out and grab that book. As I think about the folks that are on the panel today, just from the conversation that we have had today, I know that you all are going to be really successful, and you're going to need this book so that you can motivate your teams. So I would say, and then others who are out there who want to lead and who want to be entrepreneurs and do all of those awesome things. It's a really great book. It'll help you understand how people work, so that you can get the best out of them that they possibly have to give.
Nice. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys liked the episode, don't forget to hit the like button. We're going to see you guys next week. Peace.
But while you're here, be sure to check out other great content from the Breakdown crew, including previous episodes of the podcast, Joshua vs. Movies, Joshua vs. Music, and of course, haven't forgotten about my plant lovers, Feel the Love. Just check out this begonia.